Welcome to Paddock Pulse, the home of the most intense Formula One analysis on the web. I'm your host, Myke, and today, we aren't talking about lap times or tire degradation. We are talking about war. The 2026 season hasn't even begun, the cars haven't even touched the asphalt, but the battle lines have already been drawn in the boardrooms and engineering offices of Europe. We are witnessing the birth of the most controversial technical scandal in a decade. Mercedes and Red Bull have been accused of exploiting a thermal loophole that allows their engines to become illegal monsters the moment they hit operating temperature. Is it genius engineering, or is it a blatant violation of the spirit of the sport? Ferrari, Honda, and Audi have formed an unprecedented alliance to shut this down, and an emergency meeting with the FIA has been set for January 22nd. This is the story of the gray zone, the secret materials that change shape under fire, and why Red Bull is playing a very dangerous game of neutrality. Before we tear into the telemetry of this scandal, a quick reminder: if you're new to the world of F1 engines and MGUK systems, check out our F1 Beginner's Guide playlist to get up to speed. Also, make sure to support our partners at Paddock BR. I'm rocking their 100% cotton gear today. Use the Paddock Pulse coupon for a discount. And for the sim racers, Evo Design has the best rigs in the business, and Instant Gaming is your go-to for the latest racing titles. Use the links below. Now, let's get into the heat of the battle. To understand this scandal, you have to understand the gray zone. In Formula One, the rules are usually written with static measurements. When a car is in the garage, it is cold. When it is inspected by the FIA, it is cold. But a Formula One engine is a violent, high-temperature environment. The rumor, and it's a rumor that has the entire paddock shaking, is that Mercedes and Red Bull have discovered a way to use advanced material science to bypass power limits. Here is how the trick works. Engineers have developed specific components within the intake or internal combustion chamber made of memory alloys or composite materials that react to extreme heat. When the engine is being inspected by the FIA at room temperature, these parts sit perfectly within the legal dimensions. They are compliant, they are safe, and they look normal. However, once the car is on track and the engine reaches its peak operating temperature, these materials begin to deform. This isn't a failure, it's a feature. This thermal deformation changes the geometry of the air intake or the combustion flow, allowing for a massive increase in oxygen-rich air or fuel efficiency. Essentially, the engine morphs into a high-performance version of itself that would be illegal if it were measured while hot. The result: a significant boost in horsepower precisely when the driver needs it most, during a qualifying lap or a high-speed overtake. The FIA has reportedly indicated they might allow it for now, but the rest of the grid is screaming foul. They argue that if a car is only legal when it's turned off, it isn't legal at all. Usually, Ferrari and Honda wouldn't agree on the color of the sky. But in the face of a potential Mercedes dominance in 2026, the old guard and the new entry have joined forces. Ferrari, Honda, and Audi have officially formed a political alliance to pressure the FIA. Their argument is simple: this isn't an innovation, it's a dangerous precedent. If the FIA allows Mercedes to use materials that change shape to gain power, then the 2026 regulations, which were designed to be restrictive and cost-effective, will become an unlimited spending war in material science. Audi is particularly furious. They are joining the sport in 2026 with a massive investment, and they feel that Mercedes is moving the goalposts before the game has even started. Honda, who is moving to Aston Martin, knows that if Mercedes has a magic engine, their partnership with Lawrence Stroll is doomed from day one. The alliance is demanding that the FIA issue a technical directive, TD, before the January 22nd meeting. They want a rule that states any component must be measured for legality at all temperatures, not just in the garage. They are calling for rigorous and restrictive actions. The atmosphere in Paris, where the FIA is headquartered, is described as toxic. The manufacturers aren't just asking for a clarification, they are threatening legal action if the Mercedes concept isn't banned or heavily restricted. Now, here is where the story takes a weird, almost comedic turn. You would expect Red Bull to be leading the charge against Mercedes. They have been rivals for a decade. Christian Horner usually never misses an opportunity to attack Toto Wolff. But this time, Red Bull is being strangely neutral. Why? Because according to Paddock insiders, Red Bull tried to do the exact same thing. When Red Bull Powertrains, partnered with Ford, realized that Mercedes had found this gray zone, they immediately went to their labs to replicate it. They saw the potential for the thermal deformation trick and tried to build their own version. But here is the catch: they couldn't get it to work. Word on the street is that the Red Bull solution was unstable. Either the materials didn't deform enough to gain power, or they deformed so much that the engine became a ticking time bomb. Because they failed to master the magic trick that Mercedes seemingly perfected, they find themselves in a political no-man's land. They can't protest Mercedes too loudly because they've already tried to copy the concept, which would make them hypocrites. But they also won't defend Mercedes because they don't want Toto Wolff to have a horsepower advantage. Their current stance is, let's see what happens. They are waiting to see if the FIA bans it, which helps them by resetting the field, or if the FIA allows it, in which case they will spend every dollar they have to make their failed version work. It's a classic case of, if you can't beat them and you can't join them, just wait for the teacher to take their toys away. To really grasp why Ferrari and Audi are losing their minds over this, we have to look at the numbers. In the 2025 season, F1 engines operated at a compression ratio of 18:1. For the new 2026 regulations, the FIA mandated a drop to 16:1. Why? To make it easier for new manufacturers like Audi to enter the sport without spending $1 billion just to catch up on combustion efficiency. But Mercedes and Red Bull have reportedly found a way to have their cake and eat it too. By using specialized alloys, materials that most of us associate with aerospace engineering, they've designed pistons and cylinder heads that expand by just 0.5 millimeters when they hit 300 degrees Celsius. That tiny, half-millimeter expansion is enough to shrink the combustion chamber and effectively raise the compression ratio from the legal 16:1 back to 18:1. The performance gain. Insane. We're talking about an extra 13 horsepower and a lap time improvement of roughly 0.3 to 0.4 seconds. In a sport where titles are decided by thousandths, that's not just an advantage, that's a different category of racing. The rivals are calling it magic metallurgy, but the FIA is in a corner. If they ban expansion, they're essentially banning the laws of physics. Every material expands when it gets hot. The question is, did Mercedes do this by accident, or did they spend millions to engineer a controlled expansion that only happens at full throttle? This brings us to the most shocking political move we've seen in years. Ferrari, Honda, and Audi have officially formed what the Paddock is calling the unholy alliance. These three giants have sent a joint letter to the FIA technical department, demanding an immediate intervention. Think about the irony here. Audi and Ferrari are usually at each other's throats for talent. Honda and Ferrari have been rivals for decades. But the threat of a Mercedes-dominated 2026 era has unified them. Their letter argues that the current testing procedure, which only measures the engine at ambient temperature, is critically flawed. They are pushing for a new rule, the hot compliance mandate. They want the FIA to inspect engines immediately after a dyno run, while the parts are still glowing red. They know that if they can force Mercedes to redesign their pistons to be legal while hot, Mercedes will be forced to run a much lower and legal compression ratio when the engine is cold, which would kill their fuel efficiency and their power. It's a move designed to clip the wings of the silver arrows before they ever take flight. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Red Bull powertrains. You've noticed that Christian Horner hasn't been his usual loud self lately. Usually, if Mercedes finds a loophole, Horner is the first one on a soapbox calling for a ban. So why the silence? The rumors coming out of Milton Keynes are fascinating. It turns out Red Bull Ford didn't just find the loophole, they tried to build their entire 2026 engine around it. They spent months trying to replicate the Mercedes thermal expansion trick. But as the saying goes, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and the quickest way to failure. Red Bull's engineers reportedly struggled with the reliability of the expanding materials. While Mercedes seems to have a stable solution, the Red Bull thermal engine was prone to catastrophic failure during long-run simulations. Because they couldn't perfect the trick, they are now caught in the middle. They don't want to protest too hard because they might still find a way to make it work. But they also can't support Mercedes because they know they are currently at a disadvantage. They are playing neutral, not because of sportsmanship, but because they are waiting to see which way the wind blows on January 22nd. Mark your calendars, because January 22nd is arguably the most important day of the year. This is the date of the emergency FIA meeting. This isn't just a friendly chat over coffee. This is a gathering of the greatest technical minds in racing, and the tension will be thick enough to cut with a front wing end plate. If the FIA rules in favor of the unholy alliance and mandates hot testing, Mercedes and Red Bull will have just 4 days before Barcelona testing to mechanically alter their engines. This would mean a complete loss of performance and likely a nightmare for reliability. If the FIA stays the course and allows the loophole, 2026 might be over before it even starts. This meeting is a test of the FIA's new leadership. Do they protect innovation, or do they protect competition? If they let Mercedes keep this 13 horsepower advantage, they risk Audi or Honda pulling out of the sport in frustration. F1 is a business of billions, and nobody wants to play a game where the rules change based on the thermometer. Myke's prediction? Expect a compromise TD, technical directive, that limits the materials allowed, but doesn't ban the concept entirely. It's going to be a bloodbath. For those of you who have been with us at Paddock Pulse for a while, this feels like 2019 all over again. Remember the secret Ferrari settlement? Back then, rivals suspected Ferrari was manipulating the fuel flow sensor, using electrical interference to pulse more fuel into the engine in between the sensor's ticks. The FIA never officially proved they were cheating, but they reached a private settlement that saw Ferrari's engine performance vanish overnight in 2020. This current 2026 loophole is even more sophisticated. Instead of electronics, it's using the physical property of the metal itself. Mercedes is essentially saying, we aren't breaking the rules, we are just using better metal. The difference this time? The FIA has introduced the ADUO, Additional Development and Upgrade Opportunities, system. This is a new catch-up mechanic for 2026. If a manufacturer is 2% to 4% behind the leader, they get 1 extra upgrade. If they are more than 4% behind, they get 2. Mercedes' 13 horsepower gain puts them right on that 2% edge. By exploiting this loophole, they might force the entire grid into a catch-up mode that makes the ADUO system irrelevant. It's a masterclass in political and technical maneuvering. This is the most dangerous gray zone we've ever seen. It's a war of heat, metal, and politics. Mercedes has found a way to turn the engine itself into a shifting, breathing organism. The alliance of Ferrari, Audi, and Honda is ready for a fight, and Red Bull is watching from the sidelines, hoping their own version doesn't explode. What do you think, Paddock Pulse family? Is thermal expansion genius engineering, or is it cheating? Should the FIA measure engines cold or hot? Let's get a massive debate going in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and stay tuned as we count down to the January 22nd showdown. Support our partners at Paddock BR for the best gear, Evo design for your sim racing needs, and instant gaming for the latest titles. I'm Myke, and this has been the deepest dive into the 2026 engine wars you'll find anywhere. See you at the meeting. Peace.